What's up, kids? I'm back. I had a really fun time doing the reaction video to Man Carrying Thing, critiquing Critical Drinker. Every time I get a little bit of caffeinated and I react to other people's ideas, the combative asshole that I am, I always have just a ton of things to push back against. Sometimes it's shit I really believe. Sometimes I feel it's just like a default switch. You seem really sure about that answer. Let me tell you why you're wrong. And then inevitably I fuck off on all of my life obligations because I'll spend the rest of the day getting more caffeinated and engaging in masturbatory self-reflection as I try to parse through the opinions that I espoused and say, do I actually believe that? It's a good time. So of course, non-controversial as these topics are, nobody chimes in with their opinions or their rebuttals in the comments section. People just drop in to get to know each other and give their well wishes. Of course, that's not true. As the video gets more traction and more comments fill the comment section, it becomes a more and more toxic hellscape of unearned opinions, accusations of being basically the worst human being alive. You're a cancer to society, why don't you go kill yourself? So without having to go back and watch the hour-long reaction I did, let me just catch you up to speed. Critical Drinker says stoic men are a thing of the past. Man Carrying Thing says, well, your comparisons aren't really that valid because you're comparing some of the most iconic roles to like Doritos commercials, and you're showing old pictures of Marlon Brando, even though he's not stoic by any stretch of the imagination, and he was like a method actor. And then I filled the interim with just a bunch of random thoughts I have about masculinity in general, why things feel different now, who's writing movies, what their ideology is, and foundationally why I think it's leading to worse writing. I don't think it's a secret that Hollywood leans very strongly in one direction, and given that political intensity goes through highs and lows over the years, and that the last decade was pretty intense by anybody's account, it just seems obvious that that is driving a lot of what we see in terms of who's being cast, who's being selected as a writer, what those writers are saying, and how they're choosing to demonstrate their stories to the public. Now, it gets a little tricky to navigate these political waters, because obvious conclusion is going to be that I'm a filthy conservative, and then therefore I'm biased against anything that is opposed to me. I think my ideologies are a little more nuanced than that, but for the sake of convenience, let's just say I'm a conservative. I know when you guys talk about your ideological affiliation, you need 19 different qualifiers. You guys got to take 5 different political matrices tests in order to try and peg down what you are. But I make a video complaining about girl bossing and I'm just a conservative. That's fine. We don't got all fucking day, so let's go with it. So I wanted to address the accusations of hypocrisy, of politicizing things, and let's get to the brass tacks. What is causing the bad writing? Is it political? Is it a direct byproduct of the ideas that the people have because those filthy liberals just don't know what good and evil is? Is it coincidental? Does this type of writing exist on the other side of the spectrum? Am I actually just molding because I don't want to see women and people of color succeed? Let's get into it. I have a comment from this gentleman. I understand your point that major productions seem to create bad character-like incompetent men, or at least I hope I understand your point. But honestly, I think the problem is not ideology, as you seem to suggest. It is just bad writing. If your problem with the ideological shift among filmmakers is that it leads to bad writing, I think you're looking at it the wrong way. If those filmmakers subscribe to a different worldview, they would probably still make bad male characters, just in different ways. Because them being bad at their job is what lead to their bad writing. After all, I'm sure you have enjoyed a lot of media made by people with different ideologies, not necessarily because the filmmaker was any less radical, but because they were talented enough to express their thoughts in a way that makes for a compelling story. So to respond to this, I agree that bad writing is central. I agree that most of the shit that we see out in the world is a byproduct of people that just aren't talented. And I think that's part of the ideological era that we do live in. It's no surprise to anybody that Hollywood predominantly is left-leaning, hires a lot of left-leaning people, and anybody that's been close to those circles know how weirdly cultish they get about it. I mean, if you've ever been to LA, I've been to LA a lot. I hate LA. They're like aliens. They're weird people. You think LA is filled with beautiful people? No, you go to LA and you realize it's all the mid people from the Midwest that traveled to get there and started dressing all weird and hipster because they think it's really cool part of their personality that they're so close to show business. These are the most boring, vapid people you will ever meet. When they start to gather around central ideology, I'm telling you, these people don't represent anybody. So if we consider that there's been a shift in politics, I mean, people have talked a lot about how Overton's window has shifted to the point where a lot of liberals and a lot of centrists feel like they got somehow shifted to the right when they've never identified that way. So if you have a hub like Hollywood that's big on trends and fashion and what's in, and they whip themselves into a moral panic over the politics of the day, they are much more likely to select and target people that are now in. This isn't just diversity. These are the people who hold the torch that represents the things they believe, and that has been a lot of far left ideology from socialism and communism. I mean, it's a trope now. Celebrities worth hundreds of millions of dollars that have every ability to redistribute but choose not to, that are getting on TV, and like Jim Carrey, let's say yes to socialism. Like, Jim, you're worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. Nobody's stopping you, bro, from building soup kitchens all over the United States. A lot of postmodernist ways of thinking about the world. Everything today is hyper morally relativistic, and there's a big emphasis on social justice issues. So it is because that ideology is so heavily represented in Hollywood that these shitty writers were getting hired regardless of their ability to competently tell a story. So even if I agree with that primary point that it is bad writers and they would suck no matter where they are, their position there is still a byproduct of the ideology selecting for them. Now, the truth is, art-oriented people, they're always going to lean left regardless. And I've always known that regardless of like my leaning or affiliation, some of the best works in like the history of mankind, things that I love, that I have affinity for, were written by bleeding heart liberals. So how do I reconcile that? Is it that the values don't matter whatsoever? I actually don't think that's the case. I actually think it's a case that I have more in common with what you would think of as kind of an old world liberal than those liberals have in common with the people that are being selected for today. It's one thing to talk about superficial values like how you think the economy should be run. But if I were to go back 20 or 30 years and talk to whoever the leading Democrat of the day was, we would find a lot of common ground as far as our basic assumptions about individuals, about what makes a good person, what good even is, about what things society should select for, about what behaviors weren't acceptable, about what rules had to be in place so that we could all coexist in spite of our differences. Today, those tentpole beliefs that allow people to coexist are being attacked if they don't serve the purposes of the people on the extreme. We don't subscribe to free speech because everything that somebody utters out of their face hole is magical and wonderful and should be preserved for everybody to study on into the future. Most of what people say is bad, is wrong, is harmful, or is nonsense. And that's across the board, guys. So why do we cling to freedom of speech if we know that we're likely to get a bad result from it? Besides the fact that we all generally like to be able to say what's on our mind, we recognize that any organized system that takes on the task of selecting the good speech is only going to select speech that reinforces its own purpose. Left, right, or center, it doesn't matter. If you're the person turning the dials on what speech is allowed, that shit goes sideways, and it goes sideways fast. I'm not going to get into how far free speech should go or when it goes too far. That's a long video for another time that I'm probably never going to make. Now let's give an example of the differences in ideology between writers of yesterday and writers of today. If you're going to take the typical philosophies adopted by people in universities, especially in like the humanities today, and compare it to old world liberal writers, you're going to notice a pretty stark contrast. Differences for people today include a disbelief in objective morality, a disbelief in hard concepts of objective good and evil, an association of good with identity and your status in society rather than your actual behavior. Writers are going to be more likely to justify bad behavior of a character because of that character's circumstances, or if it otherwise serves what they deem as some noble goal. There's going to be a hyper focus on systemic injustice, but to the point where it's never really expected of the characters that grit, motivation, value, planning, organization, pro-social behavior is enough to overcome it. There's going to be a general belief that those who are doing well don't deserve to be doing well, or that they're somehow doing well at the expense of somebody else. And more than that, there's going to be a general sentiment of out with the old, in with the new. The idea that most old values are part of the patriarchy, part of oppressive systems, and we need to deconstruct those as fast as possible and build new ones in their place. Which is a little tricky when you're a complete moral relativist. So I don't have a requirement that somebody share all my values to appreciate their work. I watched another video of Man Carrying Thing where he was criticizing Ben Shapiro's review of One Battle After Another, which he unsurprisingly politicized the hell out of. And MCT gave a pretty good rebuttal of how you should engage with art on its own terms to get a bigger experience, and how he sees art from people who he doesn't align with, like Clint Eastwood, who's a conservative, but he still sees that as being part of his art that he can experience and take for what it is. As an example of that, I'm much more likely to watch and enjoy an old classic written by an old world Hollywood bleeding heart liberal than I am to watch anything from like Kirk Cameron's religious flick arc or anything from the Daily Wire, where I might even just get the sense that the movie exists for the ideology. But that's a point to the fact that the charity we give is not infinite. There's a point where even if it's stuff that we agree with, we recognize that the product is being warped and dominated by the mission of the people that wrote it. So there's a point where the question of are they bad writers or are they just ideologues, it doesn't really matter because it's two sides of the same coin. I can easily identify with people that have differing worldviews than I do, and that's part of the beauty of cinema in the first place. But no matter what side of the spectrum we're on, even if it's in close proximity to what I believe, there's just a point where a bad movie is badly written because propaganda tends to be bad. This individual said that movies nowadays tend to care about money and mass appeal a lot more than anything else, and that's completely true, but it's been that way for a long time. I mean, the 90s blockbuster era that I was raised in had some of the best, funnest, most like fondly remembered movies ever. And we even knew that it was just like corporate fodder. They were cheesy, they were predictable, they were formulaic plots. But the thing is, a formulaic plot hinges on a lot of these bedrock value assumptions that many of us share, regardless of whether or not we know. Formulaic plots do have good and evil. There is a bad guy to be overcome. There is some grit and perseverance that the underdog has to express in order to get his final goal. It's the hero's journey. In order to have a hero, you have to have these other beliefs about the way the world is oriented. As long as you have that and you have some reasonably interesting dialogue and a competent director, all you need is some charismatic actor to serve as the plaster that goes over the thing to carry the movie, and you have something that's going to be fun and entertaining to watch that exists as part of your cultural zeitgeist. So my critique about the people that are making movies now, they're making the same type of corporate drivel. So one of the reasons it sucks so much is because it retains that soulless corporate element. There is no art to be heard of. It's not like going into a modern art museum where I can be intrigued and also disgusted with the pretentiousness at the exact same time. It's recognizable IPs that are designed to be turned into blockbusters, but because of the culture at large, they're hiring people that are untalented based on their identity, their ideology, whatever buzz surrounds them in the crazy religious atmosphere of Hollywood. So you're getting this cheap manufactured activist tone on top of something that was kind of soulless and corporate to begin with. And if you're deconstructing all the elements of the formulaic plot that used to work so well before, what exactly are you left with? $100 million worth of CGI is not impressive to anybody anymore. You get characters that are unlikable. If they have an arc at all, it's in like a direction that we can't relate to. So no matter what, these types of people with this type of mission cannot recreate the mythos that would end up being foundational to our culture. The things you know and love from the past, our favorite comic book heroes who are beacons of virtue, our 20th century Disney animations that were infinitely better than they had any right to be, our epic fantasy adventures, heroic cops and soldiers, those all mandate the list of core foundational beliefs that I listed that just simply don't exist today. I've been to plenty of an art exhibit and I know what that mind-opening experience is to try to take somebody's art on their own terms. But that's foundationally different than actual storytelling. And all of this points to something that I said in the last video. I think the emphasis on the stoic male character was a weaker point because that's just one type of male character that's treated with respect. The broader, more important point that's hardest to rebut is that the people that are being hired to tell stories today do not have a vested interest in telling stories that reflect anybody's values. You got a small chunk of the population that actively buys into them already. You got a pretty big chunk of the population that doesn't recognize it or they're not really picking it up. And then you got the people on the other side, people like me that recognize it, take issue with it, and are going to spend way too much time out of the week bitching about it online. So to summarize, I don't even think it's like left versus right. It's not a political spectrum, it's a horseshoe. And when you go far enough in one direction, it's just like playing Mario, you come out the other side. I've always believed that like reasonable liberals and conservatives and moderates have infinitely more in common than the people on the fringes have with each other. And I don't know, hopefully this rant inspires a little bit of that belief in you. I said I'm heavily influenced by behavioral health, and I always go back to the serenity prayer from Alcoholics Anonymous. God grant me the power to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So if you fundamentally believe that there is something that you can call good and evil, if you believe that behavior is the primary driver of what makes you a good person, if you believe that you as an individual are accountable to the rest of the world, even if they don't necessarily give back, we've got exponentially more in common than you might be inclined to believe, at least enough to coexist in a productive society without killing each other. Do I want the entire landscape of writing dominated by the current ideologues we have? No, I don't. But instead of going on a political fatwa against them, I think it's infinitely more productive to just focus on the things that you and I have in common, which is that we want good stories that represent foundational truths that we share about the world. And even if you're more partial to that type of postmodernist, hyper-relativistic, deconstructionist storytelling, there is a limit to how much you can deconstruct something before you have to put something in its place. And I would ask you, what are you putting in its place? As soon as you answer that, you have enough to tell a good story. So that's all I got for today, guys. It's another rant on the state of things. Just let me know what you think. Argue with me in the comments, and I'll be right there to hash it out with you. Thanks again. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.